to another episode of the Game Day Squad Footy Show. I'm your host Cal. Joining me today we've got Tom and Kerm. Guys, we are going to have a look at the Melbourne Demons today. Are you excited?
I'm excited for this one. We've spoken about some poor teams as of late, and I'm really keen to talk about the Demons here who had such a great season last year.
Yeah, Kerm nailed it on the head, mate. We've been talking about some pretty average teams, but when you're looking at fantasy production, this is the team you want to be looking at. I cannot wait to get into this.
Yeah, they're a great team. Great team. If you have been following along, you know we've been producing videos for a lot of teams recently. We did have a month off, but now we are spitting them all out. So you'll see a video every day, I believe, coming up. For us, it's going to be a couple of minutes in between episodes, even though we are doing our best to try and change it up by changing our shirts. We are trying. But guys, let's get on to the Demons. What do you reckon?
Let's do it.
Oh, I could keep listening to that theme song play on and on. It's ringing in my ears since September, and I'm sure it has been for all Demons fans because, guys, there is one highlight for the Melbourne Demons, and that is winning their premiership. So, 50 for 7-year drought. I don't know about you guys.
Crazy.
Up until they won it, I never thought it would happen. We've grown up in an era where we only ever knew one thing for the Demons, but I'm super, super happy for them. I wanted to talk you through, and I really wanted to dig into their last 4 games that they played this season. So, in round 23, an incredible comeback win against the Cats. Came from nowhere down at Condinia Park. Goal after the siren. Max Gawn. Insane. Next game, qualifying final against the Lions. They just looked in a different weight class. From start to finish, as you can see there, we've got there how they went for the year. We'll get into all that in a second. But they just dismantled them. It looked a lot more than 30 points. They were never in the game. The next game, the Max Gawn show, pulled apart the Cats in what was like just a crazy prelim. I was really hoping it for a close one after the Port Adelaide one, or I think there was, either way around, but no, we didn't get that. And then, of course, you have it then from saying like, I was sitting there saying, if the Demons don't kick the next goal, the grand final's over. And then I think they went on to kick the next 12 in a row. I wanted to ask, has there ever been a better month of footy for a team that you guys can remember? Because that final month for the Demons, they fully deserve that premiership. They were just phenomenal.
They were insane. And that we saw pictures of Simon Goodwood shaking his head, being confused, because it was a bit dicey there for a start in the first quarter of the grand final, and boy did they switch it on. They played such good footy, and they lent on the players who got them there. Clayton Oliver, Petrarca, Maxi Gawn, and then Bailey Fritsch steps up right at the end, just out of nowhere. So they're such a well-rounded team. I think they're the most, what we spoke about last episode, Hawthorn, and how dismantled their list is and how confusing it is. But now we're talking about the Demons, who, for me, the list just makes so much sense in every single position. And it's almost like it's a breath of fresh air to see that they're strong down back, they're strong in the middle, they're strong up forward, and they got one of the best ruckmen in the league. For me, their floor is so high, and we'll talk about that later on. But yeah, the Demons, so good, so clinical.
Yeah, and with that last month, you think they'd been there before. They just look poised, in control. Like, they just look like they lived for the finals. Like, wow, I couldn't believe how well they played. And the fact that, when their backs were up against the wall, how they were able to bounce back, whether it was in the middle of the game, after quarter time, best in the league, in my opinion.
That third quarter, where they turned it around right at the end, 2 goals before the siren in the third quarter, just in the grand final, was just breathtaking footy. We'll get to the Dogs, I'm sure, and we'll talk about how much that'll sting. But no, I'm going to jump ahead. You guys, if you've been following along, you know what we do. We get into our Stars of the Year, Disappointment of the Years, but I'm not going to try and rush into that. Sorry, I'm not trying to skip that. I'm just going to tell you it's the Demons fans. You guys deserve being Stars of the Year. The one good thing about Port losing in the prelim was that I could fully jump on board the Demons train for the last 2 weeks before the grand final. Yeah. And I loved it. I loved being on the Demons train. So I can only imagine what it's been like for the guys who, particularly that 5-6 weeks that we just spoke about. So yeah, credit to you guys. I try to find a low light. It's a bit of a tough one. Petrarca and Oliver, neither of them won the Brownlow. I don't think they care. But if that's the low light from the year, then yeah, so be it. Or maybe you could say for the true Demons fans, Nathan Jones not finding a way to be there sucked as well for a neutral fan, because he's been a warrior for his whole time. But yeah, I've given you my Star of the Year, guys. Get onto yours. Who'd you have?
My star of the year was Clayton Oliver, and he's not as sexy as Christian Petrarca. He doesn't have the highlight reel that Christian Petrarca has, but he does exactly what this team needs for those players to step up and look good. 14 kicks, 17 handballs, 5.4 tackles. He is an absolute bull. The only thing that I have a knock on him for is his free kicks against, which is 1.8. It's up there in the league for frees against. But the way that he plays, you're gonna get, it's gonna happen. Those frees against will happen. So Clayton Oliver for me was an absolute superstar for them, unsung hero, because the likes of Gawn and Petrarca will reap the rewards the most and get the headlines, but he's such a superstar. He's so good at getting the footy.
Yeah, and my star of the year is a player that helps your player just be so good and just dominate the midfield. It's Max Gawn, and he's the best on and off the field in my opinion. I saw plenty of videos after them winning the premiership, and Gawn was on a roll. Hey, he is a legend. He's becoming a legend very quickly in the league. And you know, when you're getting service from Gawn, it makes your life a whole lot easier. He just makes the team so much better because of his ruck work. He led the league in total hitouts last season, 5th in contested marks per game. Outstanding season for a player. And he might not even be at his full potential yet, which is a scary thought.
Yeah. I saw a stat, someone put something up on Twitter, and it's like, what was better, his 5 goals, his like blitz against Geelong, or his performance after the grand final, his partying. And I tell you what, try pick between those two, because they were both bloody good.
BOG everywhere.
Yeah, so no surprise. I also said I didn't have a disappointment of the year. I couldn't give it to anyone. I thought maybe Nathan Jones because he couldn't get on the park, but I couldn't pick a player to give a disappointment for the year because I think that whole club deserves its flowers. But you guys have still found one each. Who'd you have?
I went with Michael Hibbard, which is a bit harsh because he's getting on in age, but in previous seasons, and fantasy players who have played fantasy for a little while will know that Michael Hibbard was once an absolute lock in your defence, and he's had seasons where he's averaged almost 28 disposals back in 2017 for the Demons, but when he was at the Bombers he was clinical as well, 22, 24, 23 disposals a game in as many seasons, so it was a bit disappointing to see him go for 13 disposals in 17 games last year. But Michael Hibbard's been an absolute star in AFL and for fantasy as well, so we'll let him off for that. But in terms of production, slightly disappointing.
Yeah, for sure. And my one is Tom Mcdonald. And, you know, he's had a couple of seasons where he's cracked the 80 and 90 GDS fantasy points average per game. This wasn't one of them, unfortunately, for him. You know, he's getting some of the best service the whole league can give you in the forward line with the midfield that the Demons currently have. And it was just the goal-kicking average per game for me. It was only about 1.5. You can see it in front of you right now. If you're getting some of the best service, the most elite service in the game, you'd want that mark to be around 2. He is coming towards the second half of nearly the end of his career as well. He's hitting that sort of older age. So I just expected a little bit more from him, and we have seen it in years prior. So, you know, I wasn't sure why it wasn't quite able to correlate over into last year.
Yeah. And the reason, like I said, I didn't want to give a disappointment is I feel like it makes complete sense you've got Tom there, but he won a premiership this year, so he doesn't care, I'm sure. I don't know, think we even need to talk about this report card. It's a pretty good-looking one. I just think, you couldn't fault them. Congrats to them.
A pluses
they deserve it. So, yeah, I know, Tom, you've given out A pluses in the past, but yeah, that one we've joined you on that. We told you we'd give you some A pluses. I know you were like, you guys are a bit harsh, but yeah, they could do no wrong this year, and yeah, congrats.
It could be an A++ if it was even possible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, what I didn't show before we jumped off there was where they sit versus the other teams, but yeah, once again, head and shoulders above every other team we've looked at so far. But let's have a talk about this year, because that's what we're here for. We are here for the Game Day Squad fantasy platform launching this year. Fantasy Reimagined, guys. It's a completely new way to play. We can't wait to get into it, start opening some packs, see who we're getting. But let's talk about how the Demons are going to go before we look at some of those players within the squad we actually want to have in our own fantasy teams. Now, a bit of a funny one there, because that 2020 season on that hill up to the premiership was, an interesting year. But I had them guys right there, and I honestly think they'll be better this year. I think they should be premiers. Like, in terms of the team, they should have the best team. That's their ceiling. But the reason I've got the floor at 6th is you see it very often in sport where a team works so hard for so long to climb the mountain that once they get there, it's very difficult to stay there. Like, if you were to... I'm almost more confident that the Demons would be a better team next year than they are this year. And I look at it, obviously I've got my Liverpool shirt on. You work so hard, 30 years to win the Premier League, and then bang, it's like, well, we've wanted that for so long, and you see it all the time with the NBA and other sports like that. So that is my one concern for them. My caveat, like I said, is they have the best list. I think they've got the best team, and I'd be very, very scared, and yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, and that's why I have them as premiers, but I just wanted to call that out.
That's a pretty good issue to have,
Yeah, exactly.
Having that sort of championship hangover or premiership hangover.
Take your NFL hat off. Come on.
Dude,
it's still going.
It's too hard. All this, I got to go from 2 American podcasts to this one. No, but honestly, like they were at the top of the mountain. You said it so right. Like the only way is down for them. Like you can't go any higher than what they did last year. I do agree. They should be premiers again this year, and they're going for another premiership run.
They remind me a lot of that Hawthorn team, like where it's kind of like you looked at them and you went, can they get better? And they did. Like that Hawthorn team, I think they beat Sydney in the grand final. What's that? 2014. It's like they went even better from the team that beat Freo the year before, and it's like that's what I'd love to see from them. I think obviously their fans deserve it. Let them enjoy it a little bit. But yeah, just sorry, Tom, we are giving you some stick for your Americanization, but you are on those other podcasts. It probably sounded like every episode we're giving you stick, but again, this is all in the space of 2 hours on our end as we get all these podcasts out for you and make sure your team review is done before the season starts in just a couple of weeks. Let's talk about some of those players we're going to have in our fantasy team for that start of that season. Kerm, you want to kick it off?
Yes, and I'm going to have Clayton Oliver somewhere in my midfield. I'm not sure where. I've spoken about a lot of midfielders so far. But Clayton Oliver, I think he's got one of the safest floors in fantasy football because he gets the ball so often. He's always around it, always under a pack, always getting tackles. So for me, Clayton Oliver will be in there and around. Controversially, knocking on my door is Maxi Gawn. We spoke about Brodie Grundy early on. I left him out as well, but I'm so all in on Sean Darcy out at Freo. I'm so excited to watch him play, 23 years old, see what he can do. Maxi Gawn will be in and around my squad if I can somehow pack him. Also, knocking on my door is Christian Petracca. I'm running out of midfield spots very quickly. That's why he's knocking on my door, but he is an absolute gun. And Christian Salem down back. I think he is going to have a sneaky bounce back year. He's been a fantasy option before in the past, Christian Salem. He sort of slowed down as of late, but I think he can bounce back as he did late last year. We started to see the old Christian Salem back. And when he gets that that halfback role, I think he's really going to nail that down. Avoiding for reasons above, Michael Hibbard, getting too old. He's going to start to see himself not get into the best 22 of this Demons team. There's so many young players coming through that are so talented that we'll speak about later. And Michael Hibbard, I think we've seen the best of now. And Angus Brayshaw, the brother of Andy Brayshaw, who was much better. Angus Brayshaw, he was once fantasy relevant, believe it or not, when he was playing down back, having that half-back role. But once he got into the midfield, he had a great grand final. He was so good in the grand final. I will never forget that performance. But he's had definitely forgettable fantasy performances last year, and I'm going to be avoiding him again as there's so much space being clogged up in the midfield by so many other talented players.
Can I jump in? Because I skipping ahead, I've got Brayshaw in the avoiding. And you're so right. His grand final performance was phenomenal. And
it's so good.
I love the sort of stories of what he's had to do. Like, he really took a step back to play the team role. And he's a massive reason why that team won the premiership and why they were so good. But from a fantasy perspective, he's going to have this big name now because of how good he was in the grand final. But the reality is he was the 12th highest average in his team, let alone the competition. So I think people will be looking for a premium on the open market for a name like Brayshaw, whereas in reality his output might not be that there. So yeah, love that one. Sorry, Tom, I will throw back to you. Who have you got?
Best 22. I've gone Gawn and Petrarca, and I want to talk about, a fantasy strategy that is used in a lot of different fantasy leagues. I'm referring to stacking of players. So getting 2 players on the same team that sort of feed into each other in terms of their fantasy production. And this is the perfect combination with Gawn and Petrarca. When you have a ruckman tapping to your inside mid and Petrarca and he's getting the clearances, both are getting fantasy points for that. And, they just play so well off each other in the midfield. And stacking's definitely a strategy you're going to want to look at doing for some of the top teams in the comp. I definitely wouldn't recommend it for bottom teams because it just doesn't work as well. But when you have such a great high-octane offense like this, stack players because you're going to get double the points in some of the plays, and that's awesome to get.
It's knocking on my door. Wide receiver type dynamic for NFL fantasy, isn't it? So I can see where you're coming from here. It could work, and I like it.
Exactly right. And they're two of the best.
Yeah, can I jump in and say that's one of the things that makes our platform so different, because other games have a restriction on how many players you can have from the same team. If you wanted to put your whole team as the Melbourne Demons team, you can. You can have 18 players. Yeah, you just can't have the same player twice. Which obviously with the different card tiers we have, you might be able to own 22 different Petrarcas, which would be pretty darn nice. But yeah, you just can't play them. But it's still awesome that you can open that up. So you can have a 4-man midfield of Gawn, Petrarca, Oliver, and then throw in someone like a Salem or someone else. So yeah, that's a strategy for people who really want to double down on it. Could be something new and exciting. And I can't wait to see how that plays out on our platform.
Exactly right. So stacking's going to be a huge strategy in terms of our game, and I'm going to be looking at doing that for the Demons team in particular, just because of how great they are. And as we mentioned before, we might not have even seen the best football from Max Gawn yet. And if he can take his game to another level with the average he had last year, that's a really scary thought. Knocking on my door, Oliver. It's a bit rough. He had such a fantastic season. Was in contention for the Brownlow, but as we've mentioned before, there's only so many spots in the team that we could fill. I don't want to do a triple stack. I looked at Petrarca and Gawn as the stacking that I wanted from this team.
Why not? Yeah, why not? Exactly. If the Melbourne fans, I'm sure you will, but you're right. You've only got 5 midfield spots, and yeah,
exactly right.
We've already put a lot in, and we're only 10 teams in, so
exactly right. And you can find great value elsewhere as well. So that's the stacking I'm looking at right there. And avoiding is the D's defense. We've spoken about how good and how great when you're a midfielder to a forward and how team success correlates into fantasy production. This isn't the case when you're a defender. It works in quite the opposite way. That the more you have to defend and the more times your number is called to make a play, of course, the more fantasy production you're going to have. So I don't want to get defenders from, the best team in the AFL because I don't think they're going to be doing as much defending as a lot of the other teams. So I'm finding value elsewhere in terms of my defense and looking more towards the bottom of the table from last year to find those sort of players.
It.
I love that. I went in my team. You can see there now. I have Oliver in my team. He's the one player that I've taken. I think he's still only going 24 into the season. Like he's still so young. He's scary.
That is bizarre.
He's 6 points away from cracking into the sort of top 5 midfielders. So he's on 125 at the moment. 131 is currently the 5th best midfielder. So he's not very far away, and he's very if he's not there, he's going to be there very, very soon. Knocking him on my door, same reasons, guys. You can only have so many track. I don't need to go into the reasons, and I just want to say with Gawn, I really do like him, but I still prefer Grundy over him. So I'm going to have him knocking on the door in case something happens with Grundy. Avoiding, I've already spoken about, so I don't need to go into that there. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting year if you do have some Demons players in, because like we said, team success is correlated with their fantasy output, particularly for those midfield and forward players. So yeah, looking forward to seeing some of them in our team do really, really well. Alrighty, Kerm, I've got a question for you. So we're talking about the Demons, and they've just come off their premiership, of course. And I wanted to talk to you about what winning the premiership on our new Game Day Squad platform is. So obviously everyone's going in some sort of competition. I wanted you to give a bit of an overview of what does someone need to do to win our competition, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so basically you just need to win weekly. And we are the new kid on the block, but we've taken a leaf from the book of the older guys who have been in the community for a long time, such as your super coaches and AFL fantasies. So at the end of the season, whoever's got the highest cumulative score at the end of the season wins. It's as simple as that. But at Game Day Squad, there's 2 leagues. There's an open and capped league. Cal, did you want to give us a rundown on that?
Yeah, of course. So what we've done, we really wanted to make sure that anyone can jump on and play our game. So we've developed a salary cap, but unlike the other fantasy games, our salary cap isn't a you have to be under it or you can't play type of thing. It's a salary cap, and if you're under it, you're eligible for the capped league, and then if you're over it, you're only eligible for the open league. But if you're in that capped league, you fill in both the open and the capped league, and your scores, like you said, get calculated weekly based on just like your normal fantasy stuff, but then get added up for that cumulative prize at the end of the year. Now, we will get into another episode, another point about what are the weekly prizes and what's the seasonal prizes. But how our cards and how we actually determine what that salary cap and where that mark is, which is 12 million, is we've actually gone and given all our different card rarities a value. So for example, all bronze cards, regardless if they're Buddy Franklin, Dustin Martin, or a player you've never heard of, is going to have a 500k hit to that salary. Whereas a legend card with a 1.5 times multiplier, that's going to have a 1 million hit. So what we've done is you can have, it means that people who play in sort of the capped league can still have a few of their sort of higher level cards, but it's mainly to keep it competitive for people, mainly who don't want to spend money going out and having to open heaps of packs and play cards. So we're still going to cater for everyone. But then on the other side, for that open league, we're going to have it in year one, so that pretty much if you own that open league, you can have as many platinums, as many legends, as many diamonds as you want, and it's purely a competition of who can get the best team and get the best cumulative scores. So going forward, we definitely want to add in a few more competitions, head-to-head, for example, potentially even add in some middle tiers as well. So produce another league that has a salary cap of 15 million, etc., etc. So no matter what level you want to play our game in, no matter how seriously you want to take it and get involved, there's a league for you guys. So yeah, a lot of exciting stuff, a lot of new stuff, but can't wait to be able to show it off to everyone.
Absolutely, watch this space.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of watch this space, we are now onto the future stars, and this is, of course, is the players that we say we can put in our team, set and forget for the next 5-10 years, and say that person's going to take me to the promised land. Who have you gone with, Colonel?
I went with Trent Rivers, who was still only 20 years old, but already played 34 games, and he spent a lot of time down back last year. And we saw that when his marks went up to 4.1, started getting some more kicks, 9 kicks a game, and some handballs as well, 6 handballs a game. Tom spoke about their defense and how that's not going to get used as much as some other teams that will be spending a lot of time down there. But when you got that halfback quarterback role that Trent Rivers could be playing, we could see it with Christian Salem handed over to Trent Rivers at some point. At 20 years old, why not take a gamble? He could be very good at going into the future.
Yeah, love it. Tom, who'd you have?
I've got Bailey Fritsch, and it's in the hopes that he can continue to evolve his game. We spoke about how great he was throughout the whole finals campaign, really, if you think about it. He really stepped up. His measurables don't look outstanding when you see them, his weight, his height, but he has a great feel for the game. And someone that he can sort of mould his game off and can develop into is something similar to Chad Wingard, which we literally just touched on in a later episode. So if he could continue to evolve his game, continue to kick more goals as he's been doing, he's going to be a player you're going to look out for in the next couple of years.
I love that. Because what he scored 7 in the grand final.
2.5 goals a game. That's
and it's such an early point in his career. Like this can go to a whole nother level, and he could be one of those players that's cracking, 70 goals in a season, 80 goals in a season in the near future, which is, we haven't had too many goal kickers like that as of recent.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see.
Yeah, would love someone to come back and kick 100 goals. We missed that in footy. I've gone with Luke Jackson for my future star. So I love this guy. So think back to 2019, they just flopped in the prelim final, and then they capitulated the year after and finished third. And what did they get outside of just being mocked by the rest of the AFL? They got this guy in the draft. And if you look back on it now, it's like, you know what? We'd take the shit that we copped getting a player like him, because 2 years later, he's won a premiership with them as the NAB Rising Star. First ruckman to ever do that. And
wow.
Yeah, crazy. So he's got Max Gawn as his mentor, and he's only 20 years of age. And it's like, does it get any better than what this kid's got at the moment? Yeah, I just love the way he's going. And yeah, he can play for ruck, he can go forward, and he's really, really elite at ground level, which is obviously crucial for being a ruckman. So he can play as almost that sort of like, almost your fifth midfielder in that team. So yeah, no, I love him, and he's going to be my future star. I want to get him. What about on the other side, where we go to some upside players, and these are players that aren't as surefire as the ones we've just said, but a lot more high variance, high risk, high reward. Who wants to kick off who they've got there?
I will, and I'll lead off straight. I had Luke Jackson as well, and I'm going to stash him away for a long time. I think once he gets that role 100%, he's going to be an absolute lock at the ruck position, because he's, as you mentioned, he's so good at ground level, and you need that as a ruckman these days. You can't have the I mean, Todd Goldstein is still absolutely dominant in hit-outs, but isn't getting around the ground as much. So yeah, Luke Jackson, he's going to be an absolute lock. And I went with Pickett as well as a little sneaky forward pick. I think he could probably end up playing on the wing at some point in his career. Inside work, I'm not sure he's going to get, but playing up the ground on the wing, I can definitely see. And we know that these wingers who can push up the ground and get those inside 50s get a lot of fantasy points. So Pickett for me, I'll be stashing away in my club for a long, long time, and hopefully they can break into my 22.
Yeah, I've got him too, and with him, it is risky because that sort of could be an electric player as like an AFL player. You know, I could see him being a guy that, like an Eddie Betts, where you can turn it on, kick 5 goals in a quarter, but maybe doesn't become
the fantasy relevant
player. But with him, there is that skill there, and he's still so young, and you're just like, you know what? Maybe he could be that green that sort of gets you 100 points and is really, really damaging. Who'd you go with, Tom? Because it's looking like you've doubled down on
Fritsch, yeah, and it's only because, like, yeah, we're speculating that yes, he will continue to get better, but there is no guarantee in that, and there are going to be a lot of other players coming through that forward line and potentially stepping up and kicking more goals, as we've already just mentioned. I truly do believe that he is going to take it to the next level, and that it's not going to be a high upside player. This is going to be a player you want to pick up now before he starts getting too good and before everyone catches on. But I've sort of just doubled down on my pick, if I'm being honest with you. Fritsch is going to be a good player in the league. You're going to want to pick him up.
You love him that much. He's a star, and then also could be a star. Love it.
Double star.
You just use double star. Yeah. We'll go finally to the dynasty, and it's going to be no surprise. They are at the top of the Christmas tree. They will compete for multiple premierships. They are good enough for it. There wasn't even a thought that crossed through my mind that they're not. That's a one and done type thing. You all agree with that? I'd be very surprised if anyone disagrees with
100%. The floor for this season before was 6th. I think anything out of the top 4 is a bit of an L for them going into this season. So the only thing that takes them down is injuries, and even then they've got so much depth. So
knock on wood. You never hope that would be the case, but their team is really deep, irrespective, and even if they do cop a couple of injuries, that's sort of where you're going to want to be looking for your upside players. Like, who is going to step in and fill in that void when someone does step out? That's probably the value throughout the season that you're going to get.
It could remind me a little bit of, say, when Richmond won their first flag and then they ran into Mason Cox in the prelim. Like, I think everyone thinks Richmond were the best team that year, and it's just like, on that night, Mason Cox and the Pies were better, and, West Coast, you could probably argue, stole Richmond's flag there. So, yeah, I could see something like that where, a team like the Lions maybe stuns them or something in the prelim. Hopefully my power. But, yeah, so you're right, Kerm. Anything outside of top 4 would be disappointing. But, yeah, top 4 I think is all just a given unless we do see them completely fall off with that premiership hangover. Yeah. So, guys, that wraps us up for the Demons. I think that's been a fun one. We've talked about some pretty rubbish teams.
That was actually exciting.
Yeah, it's good. It's actually good to talk about players that we're genuinely going to have in our team and, players that we really want to build around. We move on to North in our next episode, but before we do that, which it looks like it's probably going to be 5 minutes on our end or an hour and a day or two on your end, Tom, there's a couple of things you of course want our listeners and viewers to do.
Guys, we're banging out these videos for you in preparation for the fantasy season that's coming up and the launch of our fantasy game that's going to revolutionize fantasy platforms in Australia first and potentially all over the world eventually. So guys, please like, subscribe to the channel, put those post notifications on. As we mentioned, we're banging out these videos for you guys in preparation for the AFL fantasy season that is rapidly approaching and the launch of GameDay Squad Australia's fantasy platform that is going to revolutionize Australian sports in year 1 and potentially the world for years to come. We've got all of our socials in the description, and please leave a comment. Maybe we missed out on a player that you might think is a bit better than the players we picked. We would love to hear it from you guys. But other than that, we'll catch you guys in the next one.